Hello everyone, and welcome to Dutch Greybeard. At the beginning of 2014, I found myself reading Isaac Asimov all of a sudden, one of the most prolific writers of all time. Within 2 months, I read all of the Foundation novels in a frenzy. I read the series in the chronological order of the story. The prelude to Foundation, Foundation and Empire, Second Foundation, Foundation's Edge, Foundation and Earth, and finally, Forward the Foundation. I intended to write reviews of all 7 of them, but I only managed doing that for the first 4 novels and couldn't find the time to review the final 3, even though I had thoroughly enjoyed reading them. Now, more than 10 years later, it is impossible for me to recapitulate my reading experience of those final 3 books. Still, I believe that the reading experience that I did manage to finish writing will give you a good idea of how much I enjoyed my first encounter with Isaac Asimov. There will be some spoilers up ahead, so if you intend on reading this series, it is best to postpone watching this video. I read Prelude to Foundation, published in 1988, in February of 2014. The book is 493 pages long. The story takes place on the planet of Trantor. Emperor Cleon I has heard of a mathematician called Harry Seldon, who comes from the remote planet Helicon. Seldon is said to have claimed that he can predict the future. He has published a paper on it and given a lecture on Trantor. Cleon invites him. Seldon emphatically assures him that his reputation is based on sensationalism and that his mathematical approach to predicting the future is purely a theoretical thesis. The practical application of psychohistory, as his science is called, is unfeasible. By the way, psychohistory is based on the following premise. All history shows that we do not learn from lessons of the past. Cleon is not impressed. With his own politically rather shaky position in mind, he wants to use Seldon for his own purposes. You don't need to predict the future. Just choose a future, a good future, a useful future, and make the kind of prediction that will alter human emotions and reactions in such a way that the future you predicted will be brought about. Better to make a good future than to predict a bad one. Reporter Chatter Hummin warns Sheldon that he will be captured by Cleon's first minister, Ito Demerzel. Now that he will not cooperate with Cleon, Demerzel will make sure that he is not used for someone else's purposes. Harry regrets going public with his theory of psychohistory. He may not be able to put his prediction of the future into practice, but he knows one thing for sure: the Galactic Empire is dying. He meets Dors Venabili, who takes it upon herself to protect Seldon. Not a moment too soon, as it would seem. One day, Seldon decides against her advice to go on a field trip to the upper side. Trantor consists entirely of metal buildings, and whoever wants to go outside has to go up. This rarely happens because the weather on Trantor is usually very cold and wet. Under suspicious circumstances, Seldon gets cut off from the group and can't find his way back. Alarmed by his absence, Dors starts an investigation and, thanks to her persistence, she manages to save Seldon just in time. Hummin and Dors then decide that they must go into hiding with Seldon. Harry Seldon claims that the downfall of the Empire is already underway and that nothing can stop it. If nothing is done at all, an enormous period of barbarism and anarchy will break out. But Seldon believes that if he can get his psychohistory working, he can make that barbaric period last considerably shorter. To do this, he needs more insight into history so that he can better extrapolate what has happened to what is yet to happen. It would be best if he could follow humanity from the beginning of their space travels, that is, from the world where humans originally came from. However, in the year 12,020 GE, Galactic Era, that information is nowhere to be found. For their hiding, they choose the Mycogen sector on Trentor. They are welcomed by their leader, Sunmaster 14. The Mycogenians are said to have a lot of knowledge of the distant past, and it is rumored that they even come from the original world of humanity. There is also rumor of a robot in their community. It no longer functions, but it is said to be the last relic of the original planet where robots were widely used. Selden manages to convince Raindrop 43 to let him read her secret religious history book. Selden doesn't learn very much from this, except that the Mycogenians call their home planet Aurora. Harry and Dawes manage to enter a kind of temple and indeed find a robot there. They are caught, and just in time, Human arrives to save them from a rather dire situation. They decide to go to the Dal sector, a poor area. Life in Dal is hard. The people here provide the energy supply to Trentor under miserable conditions. Here, Harry and Dawes meet Hugo Amaril, someone who will play an important role in the final volume of the series, which takes place a few years after the events in this book. In his search for history, Selden comes across a certain Mother Rita who lives in Billybottom, a bleak and unsafe neighborhood. Nevertheless, Harry and Dawes go to Mother Rita, who is supposed to know about the existence of Earth. Here the name of the original planet is mentioned for the first time. Aurora was not the first planet, as Harry had assumed. In fact, she says, they were the enemy who destroyed the original planet, Earth. When he asks about the robots, she says, there was an artificial human being who helped Earth. He was Dani, friend of Bali. He never died and lives somewhere, waiting for his time to return. We also meet Rach in Billybottom. They bring him along and he will return in later books. A group of thugs provoke them and start a fight. Dawes, who had brought a few large knives at the start of their stay in Billybottom, shows her extraordinary fighting skills in a spectacular fight. The thugs don't stand a chance. After more wanderings on Trentor, Selden comes to the realization that he doesn't have to find the original planet at all to develop his psychohistory. Everything he needs is available on Trentor with its great cultural diversity and sectors. Human, who has just revealed that he is the same as Ito de Merzel, promises Selden his help. A remarkable dialogue ensues. You trust me then, despite the fact that I am de Merzel? Entirely, absolutely, but I do so because you are not de Merzel. But I am, insisted Human. But you are not. Your persona as de Merzel is as far removed from the truth as is your persona as Human. What do you mean? Human's eyes grew wide and he backed away slightly from Selden. I mean that you probably chose the name Human out of a wry sense of what was fitting. Human is a mispronunciation of human, isn't it? Human made no response. He continued to stare at Selden, and finally Selden said, Because you're not human, are you, Human de Merzel? You're a robot. Indeed, he is the robot Mother Rita spoke of. R. Daniel Oliver. He must obey the 0th law of robotics, the law that was added after the well-known 3 from iRobot. A robot may not injure humanity or through inaction allow humanity to come to harm. They decide that Selden will really develop his psychohistory in order to free humanity from that huge and long period of anarchy and barbarism as quickly as possible. Prelude to Foundation is a very good book with a lot of profundity. Well written, although there are hardly any language gems to be found. It is all about the story, which is put on paper solidly and thoroughly. The premises of the inevitability of history fascinates me enormously. I also found it interesting to look back over the centuries. One of the downsides of Asimov's writing is the lack of humor. It is all equally serious and almost businesslike. In that respect, Heinlein is clearly his superior. I also find his galactic empire, which consists of no less than 25 million worlds, a little bit over the top. Had the numbers been a little more moderate, that would have made things less fantastic. If you're going to make it so wild, more than 10,000 years after our current present and 25 million worlds, I would expect that everything would look and be really different. But in terms of technology and social morale, things are pretty much the same in the Foundation series as they were in the time this first novel appeared in 1986. One of the absolute upsides of this writer is his twist at the end of the story, which few people will see coming. And still, at that point, I could see, yeah, that makes sense. With Asimov, it is not always what you see is what you get, but what you get is definitely worth it. I read Foundation, which was published in 1951, also in February of 2014, and it is 296 pages long. I struggled a bit with this book in the series. It consists of 5 parts, each about 50 to 80 pages thick. The reader makes enormous leaps in time with each part, and just when you're a little familiar with the characters from one part, you're confronted with completely new characters in a completely different time. That took me some effort, I have to admit. Maybe that is why I'm not a big fan of short stories. Just when I feel at home in a world and the characters, I have to say goodbye again. What may also play a role is that these 5 parts were originally published as separate stories. In the first story, Psychohistorians, it is explained that the Galactic Empire, which has existed for 12,000 years, appears stable and powerful at first glance. However, appearances can be deceiving. The mathematician and psychologist Harry Seldon from Part 1 knows that the empire is slowly but surely falling apart in a similar way to the Roman Empire. His psychohistory is a new science in which all possible developments in large societies are converted into mathematical formulas. This way he may be able to predict the future. Thanks to psychohistory, Seldon knows that the empire will completely fall apart during the next 300 years. After that, a dark age of chaos and barbarism will begin, which will last 30,000 years no less. According to Seldon, an alternative future is possible by collecting all human knowledge in the Encyclopedia Galactica. The fall of the empire cannot be prevented, but the Dark Ages will then last only 1 millennium instead of 30. Considered a prophet of doom, Seldon and his team are banished to the remote planet Terminus. The second story, The Encyclopedists, takes place some 50 years after Seldon's banishment to Terminus. It is the year 50 FE, Foundation Era. The people are working hard on the encyclopedia, but it turns out to be a diversionary tactic. Every now and then a video message from the now deceased Harry Seldon appears in the so-called Time Vault. These messages, which he recorded shortly before his death, are to prove or disprove that his predictions based on psychohistory are correct. He says that the Encyclopedian Foundation has served its purpose. We extracted an imperial charter from the emperor. By it, we attracted the 100,000 humans necessary for our scheme. From here on, the path they have to walk is inevitable. You will be faced with a series of crises. These will become known as Selden crises. He also explains to his audience that he cannot yet set out the entire plan of psychohistory. Were you to discover those ins and outs, our plan might fail. This sets the tone for all the books in the series. Every time at the end of a story or a book, the whole thing turns 180 degrees and you are completely surprised as a reader. That happens in every book in this series. In the third story, The Mayor's 30 years have passed. With scientism, the Foundation reaches the status of a religion that no one dares to attack. This also turns out to be part of psychohistory, and like the encyclopedia, it is a cover to get to the next situation. The mayors, leaders of different planets, form the ruling elite. The Foundation is technologically superior to the planets of the mayors. So when one of the mayors wants to attack the Foundation, he stands no chance. Not only in terms of technology, but also because he attacks a generally accepted religion in the Foundation, which is not tolerated in popular opinion. In the next video message from Harry Seldon, it turns out that he had also predicted this crisis. The fourth story, The Traders, takes place around the year 135 FE. The Foundation has grown enormously and has sent its traders out to exchange technology with the neighboring planets. And in the final story, The Merchant Princess, set 20 years later, a Selden crisis is expected in the form of a nuclear war between the Foundation and the surrounding planets. In short, the reader walks from one Selden crisis to the next, knowing that its psychohistory has already devised a remedy for it. For me, this was no doubt the weakest volume in the series. A lot of plotting and fleetingly drawn characters who make no impression whatsoever. However, the premise of the story is overwhelming. You really want to know if humanity can escape the 30,000 years of barbarism. But there is much more to psychohistory than is revealed in this original first part. Foundation and Empire, the third novel in this series, was published in 1952. I also read this one in February of 2014, and it is 282 pages. In this book, Asimov adds a deeper layer to his story, which again completely misleads the reader at the end. From the first of the two parts that make up this novel, it becomes clear that Harry Seldon has not founded one foundation, but two, both at the end of the universe, although we're not let in on the specifics. The second foundation is a secret, so that it can develop itself while the first foundation functions as a diversion. The next Selden crisis, while the Empire has not even completely collapsed, is already looming. The experienced general of the Galactic Empire, Bel Riose, plans an attack against the Foundation. The Foundationers are becoming too powerful. He believes that his superiority in men and material will bring him victory. A beautiful discussion between Riose and someone who believes in psychohistory questions the value of free will. "Why do you say the Empire cannot defeat this small enemy?" Riose asks. "Because I have faith in the principles of psychohistory. And if I exercise my prerogative of free will, if I choose to attack next year or not to attack at all, attack now or never, with a single ship or all the force in the Empire, do whatever you wish in your fullest exercise of free will, you will still lose. Because of Harry Seldon's dead hand, because of the dead hand of the mathematics of human behavior that can neither be stopped, swerved, nor delayed." It goes without saying that the war is not won by the Empire, as predicted by psychohistory. Belrios is neutralized before the war even begins. In the second part, The Mule, the story really gets going. We live about 100 years after the events of the first story in this novel. The Empire has ceased to exist, and Trantor, the home planet of the Empire, has been destroyed by a barbarian fleet. Most of the universe has been split up into small barbarian kingdoms. The Foundation has grown and is now the most dominant faction in the universe, controlling its regions with the help of the trade network it has built up over the past centuries. But even within the Foundation, there is unrest and mutiny is threatening. On a different and more important level looms the threat of a man called the Mule. He has the gift of feeling and manipulating someone's emotions. Nothing and no one can stop him, not even the Foundation. When Harry Seldom reappears in the Time Vault, it turns out that he did not foresee the existence of someone like the Mule. The Foundation falls prey to the Mule's unbridled expansionist urge. He goes in search of the location of the second Foundation. With the help of the technology of the first Foundation, it is child's play to destroy the second Foundation as well. Yet the location and the precise purpose of this second Foundation remain hidden. It seems as if Seldon's entire psychohistory has come to an end, and that the barbarism of 30,000 years has finally arrived. The discovery and destruction of the second Foundation is only a matter of time. Feeling and being able to manipulate someone's emotions and feelings will form the basis for the cause of the Foundation saga. In this book, Asimov has laid the foundation for this. A wonderful book that turns out to be not so much a page-turner, but a book-turner. The Second Foundation was published in 1953, and I read it in March of 2014. It has 279 pages. Even in the Time Vault, where Seldon shows his video messages to the generations after him, it seems as if Seldon wasn't able to predict a deviant like the Mule. In thinking that, people don't truly understand Seldon's insights and his psychohistory. Why? Because he has secretly founded a second Foundation. The Mule intends to solidify his absolute power by destroying the second Foundation as well. Where this second Foundation is located and what its purpose and design is remains unclear for a long time. The first part of the novel, Search by the Mule, tells the story of how the Mule has brainwashed several top Foundation figures and uses them for his quest. But he discovers that minds under my control have been interfered with, delicately, subtly, but not so subtly that I couldn't notice. In small chapters, the so-called interludes, Asimov slowly but surely lifts the veil from who or what these second Foundationers are. We deal here with psychologists, and not merely psychologists. Let us say rather scientists with a psychological orientation. During a meeting, one of them argues, "We must allow the Mule to find us, in a sense." Then their leader, the first speaker, tells them who they are and what their purpose is. Emotional contact, such as you and I possess, is implicit in the human brain. Most humans can read emotion in a primitive manner by associating it pragmatically with facial expression, tone of voice, and so on. The faculty of direct emotional contact tended to atrophy with the development of speech a million years back. It has been the great advance of our second Foundation that this forgotten sense has been restored to at least some of its potentialities. The Mule is rendered harmless through psychological means and then sent back to his home planet. There he is allowed to continue to play the role of benevolent ruler until his death. He will be a far happier man henceforward, too, for the few years of life left him by his maladjusted physique. And then, after he's dead, Selden's plan will go on, somehow. The second part, Search by the Foundation, takes place 55 years after the death of the mule. The members of the first foundation now know of the existence and purpose of the second foundation. A beautiful conversation between a student in the second foundation and the first speaker provides the basis for a lucid passage in which Asimov explains the importance of psychohistory, of which the psycho is only now beginning to have real meaning. All the suffering that humanity ever knew can be traced to the one fact that no man in the history of the galaxy, until Harry Selden, could really understand one another. Every human being lived behind an impenetrable wall of choking mist within which no other but he existed. Psychohistory has been the development of mental science. Through the development of the mathematics necessary to understand the facts of neural physiology and the electrochemistry of the nervous system, it first became possible to truly develop psychology. Because the psychologists open their minds to each other, they can trust each other completely. We also gain more insight in the actual mathematical calculations in such a way that even a layman like myself can understand it. It leads to insight into our many human shortcomings, which should ultimately lead to the emergence of a new society, in which these human shortcomings are not so much eliminated as in which they are harmless to the continued existence of a relatively peaceful society. The first speaker's argument also makes clear why it is so important that the first foundation, which pulls the strings behind the scenes of the human battlefield so that developments can continue to move in the right direction, has to remain a secret, especially for the first foundation. If a sizable group of human beings learned of the key details of the plan, their actions would be governed by that knowledge and would no longer be random in the meaning of the axioms of psychohistory. In other words, they would no longer be perfectly predictable. By being forced to take action against the mule, the second foundation has exposed themselves. Their actions are now predicated on that knowledge. This threatens to undermine the entire Selden plan. The student is given the task of studying this problem and coming up with a solution. In the story, we follow several first foundationers who are tasked with finding the second foundation. What we do not yet know is that the second foundationers have moved to several places in the human battlefield. They can view, control, and, where possible, even direct someone's mind. There is an endless cycle of double crosses. And that is exactly what Asimov plays with so masterfully. Second Foundation is without a doubt the best book in the series so far. Unfortunately, that's how far my reading experiences were documented. I remember that the 3 final books in the series were equally compelling to me as Second Foundation, with twists, deep human psychology, and great storytelling. After this, I immediately read the Robot series, the Galactic Empire trilogy, as well as several standalone novels. In total, I have read 17 of Asimov's novels. Being immersed in fantasy at the moment, I do not see myself reading much more of this author. Just one of his unread titles remains on my shelves, The End of Eternity. It's a short book, so I'll probably throw this in for good measure among the huge Stormlight Archive books I am currently reading. Thank you very much for watching this video. Until we meet again at Dutch Greybeard.